2nd, which was 2 days ago.
Okay.
First of all, let me start out with what was your objective or your learning intention for students for the class that day?
Okay, so that day we were talking about the Civil War. We were looking at the issue of secession, whether or not southern states should or should not secede based on pros and cons of what secession means during the Civil War.
Okay, and I noticed that you brought up the political, economic, and the social impacts, both of the North and the South.
Yes.
How would you rate your lesson on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think the lesson was good. I think the content was good. I think it matched up with the objectives well. Execution could have been a little bit better. I would say maybe like a 6 or a 7.
Okay.
For total lesson.
Okay, 6 or a 7. What are some things that you believe worked well throughout the lesson?
I believe that modeling really helped because the assignment was to look at a certain participant in the Civil War and look at who they were and take their perspective and decide based on what they would want north, south, but what should they secede. And that can be that can kind of be a broad task. That can be difficult, especially for some students to do that, to narrow down and focus. So I think modeling like 1 or 2 examples. Okay, Abraham Lincoln. Would Abraham Lincoln wanted half of his states to leave, or would he wanted half of his states to, why would he have wanted them to stay or leave? I think setting that up for them helped them.
Okay, so modeling. What I did, you wrote the letter that day.
Yes.
So in reference to modeling, I did like how you walked about the room after you give directions on the writing stance. And you would actually pick up different students' writings and read through it. And the way that you did that, you gave them direction on how to, I guess, take their writing to a further extent to allow them to better comprehend the actual assignment in whatever was taught in the lesson that day.
Yes.
So that I did like that. What
Okay.
What do you think are some things that could have worked, or what are some things that you believe need to be reinforced?
That particular day, well, pretty much, not every day, but just classroom expectations, basic classroom expectations. There were several people on their cell phone that should not have been. No one should have been on their cell phone. I did not instruct them to be. And so I did have to mention that to a few students, and most of them were, obedient. They put it away. I think there were a few that were more reluctant. So I think having that basic classroom expectation would have helped more students to be fully engaged as opposed to maybe half.
Okay. So when you're opening the lesson, to set out those rules, those expectations first and foremost, and then make sure that you follow through with everything. So if they have their phone out, then follow through with the policy and either take their phone.
Yeah.
Save it to the end of the class, end of the day, or if it's a continuous ongoing thing, just take it to the office.
Okay.
I didn't notice if you conducted a warm-up that day to kind of get the students engaged in what the lesson was.
The warm-up was a little ambiguous. It was more of a review from the previous day was what I focused on.
Okay.
It definitely could have been more concrete of a warm-up, more, I guess, kind of a grabber, attention grabber. There was room for improvement with the warm-up.
Well, I noticed with the questioning that you had, most of the students raised their hands. They did answer. They did know the content, so they were getting some of the content. They were understanding it, and to the point of mastering it. As far as your differentiation technique, do you believe it was more teacher-led or more student-led?
It's the actual, like we spoke about the writing a letter, that was more student-led. And that was when I was walking the room and providing my advice, my opinion on what might
Right.
probe them, what might make them, take that thinking a little bit further.
Okay. What are some different differentiation that you think you could use to actually get it more total student centered, and then that way you can use different checks for learning or checks for understanding, rather than just questioning techniques. Maybe something like pose something and have them, think, pair, share, or
Yeah, I was gonna say,
something along that line.
I was gonna say like more partnering, or at least for maybe not the entire class, but for part of the class, partner. What do you remember from yesterday, or whatever the lesson is, not necessarily just from yesterday, but I think that communication with each other may be even sometimes more effective than my communication.
Okay, and I did see some students off task on their phone, but I've never seen students kind of respond, even though it seemed they were off task. It definitely looked like they were off task in messing with phones, but they responded to a lot of your questions. That was something that was really, it was crazy to me. I've never seen that before. How about checks for understanding? I know you did a lot of questioning.
Yes.
How could you take that questioning and make it more challenging, more rigorous, or even define, what do you think are some concepts you could use to get that check for understanding?
At the end of the class, I did ask for a little bit of input about the letters. I should have time managed a little bit better to have left some more room, because I kind of ran out of time there at the end. But I think spending the last 5 or 10 minutes of class having people share what they created, that could spark some engagement from the other students who maybe didn't quite get it as much.
Right, and I did notice, I was going to bring that up. After I watched you go around and you kind of probe them to use prior knowledge to kind of think about their letter, I know you said, go ahead and give me 2 paragraphs, and if you notice they gave 1 paragraph, then you kind of probed them and guided them in a direction where they could actually quickly come up with a second paragraph using what was taught in class. So if it was 1 paragraph talked about political impacts, you guided them to, hey, well, how could you use this to talk about an economic impact?
Right.
And I love the fact that a lot of the students, they were sharing their papers with each other. And not only that, they were actually reading, and they'd make marginal comments on the other student's paper. And then they'd go ahead and hand it back. And by that time, I think we were running out of time, so I don't know if the students could actually, if they had a chance to reflect.
Right.
They did real quick, but if they had a real good chance to reflect on what was commented, to make their improvement better. And the writing aspect, because STAR is coming up, I thought that was a good way to incorporate some of that information, so then that way it kind of preps them for STAR. Right. Do you think anybody had a difficult time trying to start the letter?
Yeah, I think so. I think there were a few. So I think what I did was, I tried to get the first sentence going. So maybe, I don't know what the technical term is, but just kind of giving them a push. And so, you always start, dear so-and-so. I maybe give them a sentence starter, basically.
Okay.
I'm writing
Yes.
to you to let you know what it's like in Texas. Like, there's a perfect sentence starter. And I think I said that to several. I don't know if I said it to the whole class, but I know I said it to a few students. And
So kind of,
and then they can kind of go from there. Then they can look at their notes or whatever they saw and then say, oh, what is it like in Texas? Okay, it's blah,
so
blah, blah.
we could go back and do that, and you could probably put on the overhead, maybe model how a letter is.
Yeah.
Because I think the students themselves, they probably haven't really actually sat down in middle school and wrote a letter per se, like you would do, say, in third or fourth grade.
True.
So they are going to forget those kind of
Yeah.
simple things, because right now they're in ELA and they're using different strategies. I think one of their strategies was APES to
Yeah.
come up with writing actual essays, not necessary letters.
Yeah.
So I like maybe use modeling like
Yeah.
you did at the very beginning.
I put the rubric on the board, but
Mhm.
I should have modeled it as well.
Okay, so how do you think you could have adjusted your lesson to kind of come more off of the teacher center and allow them to take control of their own learning?
Well, looking back, I could have incorporated maybe something like a primary source. I'm sure there are tons of letters out there that are very similar to what I asked them to do. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but I'm sure they're out there. So maybe I
Okay.
could have incorporated that and had them look at that, and from that and their notes, they could write their own letter. That would make it much more student-centered, I feel like.
Okay,
I didn't
okay.
do that. Maybe next time I'll do that.
More, yeah, because I did notice some good things that I did notice. At the very end, you put everything into a real world scenario or a concept using the political, the economic, the social, and using secession, and then going back and reviewing what you taught them, the day before,
Right.
or using that prior knowledge to activate different scenarios that put the learning into the real world as it stands today. So that was a really good concept I liked.
Okay.
I liked how you gave them feedback on their writing. I like how you gave them direction, so you understood maybe the misunderstandings that they would have writing the letter, so you give them that modeling, that direction
Right.
that guided them to actually accomplish the end goal. Some of the other things, like I say, with these students, you have your own kids. If you're not consistently across the board every day
Yeah.
coming in and saying, look, okay, here's your warm up. It's on the board. You have 5 minutes to do it.
Right.
We're going to go over it and then roll into champs. Hey, this is the activity for today. The learning intention is A, B, C, and D. Your success criteria is A and B. This is the way that we will conduct the class, so then the management and everything falls into place. Those things are like, they have to be consistent across
Right.
the board.
Right.
So if you don't do it one day, then that one day is going to just a domino effect. You'll forget about it every day, and then eventually they're going to have to be reeled back in.
Right.
You kind of want to do that right off, so then that establishes the expectations of
Yeah.
how it's supposed to be. As far as kind of like your student-led versus teacher-led, coming up with those activities that allow them to take their own learning.
Okay.
It's like fishing. You throw that lure into the pond, and the lure is brown and black. The fish they swim around it, but they don't bite on it.
Right.
Then you throw that shiny lure in there, and the fish, they stop dropping what they're doing, and they're like, oh, shiny object. It's just like students.
Right.
You throw that dull lure in there, and they're not going to bite on it. But you throw that shiny lure in there,